be authentic and honest with your daughter in a wise way. You don't want to lay everything out there that you ever did necessarily. There are some age appropriate things and all of that, but let your daughter know you don't have it all together, and maybe invite her into the process of helping you learn how to handle when you're feeling that tendency or that pull toward comparison, or you're feeling a certain fear. Just there's a lot that happens when we're a little bit vulnerable and honest, I think, in our parenting journey, that really does foster friendship with our kids.
Well, we have Sandra Stanley and Allie Stanley Cooney with us this morning. The book is called Meet in the Middle, 8 mother-daughter conversations about life and faith. So, guys, where did this book come from?
Yeah. Well, Allie and Allie is almost 29, mm-hmm. and she's our youngest. We have 2 boys and then Allie. And raising her was so much fun. And watching her develop into the woman that she is now has been so much fun. So for a long time, I have wanted to do a project with her. And we just started brainstorming one day about, and Allie, we both have done lots of years in student ministry, including Allie from the time she was a student all the way till now. So she's had a good at least decade of it herself. So we just started brainstorming about what we would want to help moms and daughters with. And we came up with this idea of Meet Me in the Middle. There are lots of conversations that can be difficult during those middle school, early high school years. And we just thought, wow, if we could help moms and daughters sort of bridge a divide, a potential divide before it becomes a divide, that just was really exciting to us. So that's kind of where the idea came from.
Yeah, and for me, like she said, I've been working in student ministry for a really long time, and I found this pattern. So these students would come to church, and we would pour into them, and we would tell them how much Jesus loves them, and we would tell them all the things, and then they would leave church, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday would happen, and then they would come back. And because it wasn't reinforced during the week, because it kind of just faded away, we felt like every single Sunday we were starting right back at ground zero. And so I love the idea of creating a resource that really equips moms to help come alongside the church and continue on with those conversations that are happening, to continue to pour into their girls spiritually instead of just hoping and praying that the church does all the work, because the church is one day a week, even for like an hour. And so realizing that we need to equip the parents in order to help these girls really have a relationship with Jesus that goes way past Sundays.
Yeah.
Love that. It's interesting how you have the book organized. Tell us how you decided on that right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, yeah, so I write 8 chapters to the moms about 8 particular topics. And that's in the front of the book. And in the back of the book, Allie has 8 chapters to the daughters on the corresponding topics. And then the section in the middle is the Meet Me in the Middle section. And this is where mom and daughter come together, and we've got discussion questions and activity ideas and all of that kind of stuff for moms and girls to do together, to just kind of open up the conversations about some things and let them sort of wade into the shallow end with some softball kind of things, and then hopefully get to some deeper conversations. And so that's how it's structured and set up.
Love that. So, Allie, we're talking about moms and daughters, and now you have a toddler.
I know. Crazy.
The difference between being mom and dad, and how it was to watch your mom become grandma and your dad become grandpa.
Yeah, well, I have this very distinct moment where I had her. Her name's Haven. I had my baby, and I was holding her. I was like 3 days postpartum or something, and I looked up at my mom, and I was like, wait, you love me this much? Oh. And you've loved me this much, like, this entire time? Because that, I had no idea. You don't have a category for that until it's happening to you. And so I think becoming a mom has really opened my eyes to everything. All of a sudden I want to get it so right. All these things that I've never thought about before or never really worried about before. And I can now see that in my parents and looking back and how they raised me and decisions they made and things that they let me do and things that they didn't let me do. I'm like, something's clicking in here right now.
I feel a little deja vu because I
I
feel
know.
like that I'm right there with you. When I
Yeah.
finally became a dad, it was like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
this is almost embarrassing for me to not have known this whole time.
I tried to tell her.
I know.
I know that through the years, I made multiple phone calls to my mom saying,
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Yes. Or thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
That's right.
Both. It is a whole new awakening. So Sandra, I know a mom's greatest hope, because I'm one too, it was for me, is to be friends and
Yes.
to get this mother role right as I'm raising my daughter. And I'm so grateful for my daughter and just the experience to be able to raise a daughter. But then life happens and you realize that mom and daughter relationships, well, sometimes they do take a turn, and they have to take a turn. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the ultimate goal being friendship with your kids. And I think that's so true, Sally. That's what we ultimately want. But at the same time, we can't do that too early. We have to navigate those years where we may be the bad guy, or where things may not be easy. And we have to get comfortable with that in order to have a healthy friendship with our kids later. So I think that's part of the hard work of parenting, is figuring out, where that line is and what's most important as it relates to ultimately having that friendship relationship. And that's where we are with our kids now. Andrew is 32, Garrett is 30, and Allie is 29. And it is so worth it to parent toward that relationship. So that's the big goal, the big bullseye on the target.
I love how you phrase that, to parent towards that goal.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
you're right. It cannot be the goal when they're toddlers. It cannot be the goal,
Yep.
when they're in the tweens, because there are difficult decisions that have to be made. And so that's what this book is all about,
Yes, it really is. But the good news is, all along the way, there's so many wonderful relational things that feel a lot like friendship, even in the context of parenting. And that's one of our goals too for this book, is for this to be fun. And Allie knows how to bring the fun. I am so structured and so goal oriented and such a list maker, and Allie is fun and creative and all of those things. So she brought the fun to the book, and that just, I think that sets moms and daughters up well to build on that relationship, even if it's a tricky topic, and to have something that feels a little bit like friendship and camaraderie in the process. Because one of the things we ask moms to do in Meet Me in the Middle is, get a little vulnerable with your daughter. Share some of the things you went through when you were her age, or that you might even still be going through. Things like comparison, which is one of our topics, that does not have an expiration date. It just looks a little different in different seasons of life. Same with fears, which is one of the topics. Some of those things. So we ask moms, hey, be authentic and honest with your daughter in a wise way. You don't want to lay everything out there that you ever did necessarily. There are some age appropriate things and all of that, but let your daughter know you don't have it all together, and maybe invite her into the process of helping you learn how to handle when you're feeling that tendency or that pull toward comparison, or you're feeling a certain fear. There's a lot that happens when we're a little bit vulnerable and honest, I think, in our parenting journey, that really does foster friendship with our kids.
It's good. Writing a book by yourself, that's quite the endeavor to undertake. I think co-authoring is a whole different thing. And then I'm sure co-authoring as mother and daughter adds a whole new layer to that. How did that process go? How was that for the two of you?
Yeah, it was very fun. We are really different from each other. And so growing up, we knew that. That was very clear. But as we were doing this project together,
I feel like there was a hidden message.
no, very clear.
There's so many stories buried beneath that comment.
Just very different from each other, which is great. So doing this project, my mom had outlines and annotations and, really, really structured. And I had sticky notes and like ideas that were just on the inside of my brain that they'll come out eventually. It's in there. And so I think we helped each other a lot. I think this project was cool because growing up, there was a lot of tension with how different we were. And this was kind of a project where we took our differences and actually made something beautiful out of them. We've never really done that type of thing before. And so it was really, really fun she really kept me on track and I kept her thinking. And let's say that, how can we say that differently and more creatively? And so it was definitely different. We had to figure it out, but it was really fun, and it's fun to see how our differences can come together and help each other instead of just causing tension like it did when I was a teenager.
I'll tell you here's what was infuriating in this process.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, I love that
Do
word.
tell.
Yeah, here we
Here's
go.
what's infuriating. I would do my chapter, and it would take me 2 weeks for one chapter. Allie would do the same chapter, and it would take her 2 hours. And hers was so good. And so, it would make me then want to go back and rewrite mine. And of course, we did have a lot of hey, let's, massage these to make them really fit together and work together and all that. But it's just so funny to me how gifted she is with just in writing and in content creation and also in speaking. She just has Andy's whole set of gifts, which is so fun. But it was infuriating. I'm like, Allie, I'm still working on the fear chapter, and you've already, blown through the whole thing.
Sandra, it sounds like you're a type A, and she's more of a creative.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I am, and I'm just very analytical and formulaic, and and Georgia Tech girl. I can solve for X so great, but being creative is a little bit hard.
Yeah, and I will say I had a baby. So I think we started this project when she was 4 months old.
Oh, wow.
And so I had 2 hours, and if I didn't write it in those 2 hours, it was not getting written. So I kind of was like, yep, this is what I got. This is what I had during nap time. So
and she crushed
figured it out.
So yeah.
I love that. Well, I love this whole process illustrates how I think sometimes you kind of get to a point where you think you know everything about the other person. And so it sounds like there was a deepening of that relationship and you were able to rediscover and then learn even entirely new things about one another through the writing of this book. That's fun.
That's definitely true. And you know what? It's even a little tiny microcosm of the body of Christ. God has just gifted us all so differently with different, strengths and proclivities and all of that. And yet when you see it come together, it's just a beautiful thing that God is just so good at doing. So it was fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I did want to hit on one thing, Allie, that your mom shared.
Yeah.
Allie's rules for high school.
Yep.
Tell us about a few of those rules, because I love that.
I'll let her tell it, and then I'll tell you my version.
So yeah, a little background. It's the whole thing is so crazy, and it's crazy that we're even still talking about it 10 years later, because I wrote it for a very specific context. And then my mom put these rules that I wrote on her cute little blog that I was like, oh, grandma will love that. Like no one's going to see that. And then it blew up, and it was on radio shows. It was like everywhere. And I was going through, like I had written it, it blew up. And then I went to Auburn and was like going through sorority recruitment. And like basically sorority recruitment is just trying to get people to like you and let me into their little club. And so I would go in and like really try to get these girls to like me, and then I would come out and look at my phone, and I was like blowing up, and I'm like, see, do you guys look at this? Do you guys like me if I do that? Like it just was messy and crazy and chaotic. But the rules basically were, I was a small group leader for a group of middle school girls, and they were going into high school as I was graduating high school and going into college. And so I just wrote them 30 just little things that I hope that they remember, that I felt like if they did, they would leave high school with as few regrets as possible. So those include being a really good friend, continuing to follow Jesus. A lot of them had to do specifically with boys and relationships. And I actually got in a little bit, once again, I didn't write it thinking any of my ex-boyfriends would see him. And then all of my ex-boyfriends did see them. So that was yikes.
Yikes.
But one of them is if you think you should break up with him, just go ahead and break up with him. So that one,
Yeah.
good advice, but didn't know some people were going to see it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So my version of the whole thing was, it was a particular day. Allie's a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate. I had been up to her room earlier in the day and noticed that it was in complete disarray, just stuff everywhere.
Probably fine.
And so I was going to need to have that conversation.
That right there was gold. That was
Yeah.
awesome.
That was just how it always was. So I was going to have that conversation when she got home from school of, Allie, this is just not okay. We gotta do something about this room. So she gets home, she's up in her room, and I'm gearing up, to go upstairs and we're going to clean up the room conversation. And I round the corner, and she's sitting on the floor in the middle of all the things, and she's just furiously typing on her computer, on her laptop. And she said, Mom, before I could even say anything, she's like, Mom, I have this idea. And so she tells me, she said, my girls are getting ready to go to high school. There are just a whole lot of things that I just want them to remember. So I'm writing Allie's rules for high school. It's going to be about 20 things. And she said, let me read some of them to you. So she starts reading to me. And as you can imagine, as a parent or an aunt or a grandmother or anybody, when your daughter starts reading you those things, the temperature inside of me about the silly little clean your room thing just came down until I was just looking at her and I was in tears, and I was like, Allie, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. And I thought I would take a messy room 1,000 days and have this. There's just nothing like it. I was so inspired by her and proud of her in that moment. And I said, can I put these on my blog? And she's like, sure. And again, later she came clean and said, Mom, I didn't think anybody would see it. And really, truly, the new school year was starting, and it was on all the the biggest drive time radio show in Atlanta. The guy, his name is Bert, he was reading them. He and everybody in his studio were reading them like one or two at a time and commenting on all of them and just talking about how great it was. So all these people are taking their kids to school on the first day.
Show.
What?
Either.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what the Burt Show is. You're
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, the Bert Show.
Yeah,
It was
one of
so
my former
Bert.
coworkers is on it. Yeah.
Yeah, so they were reading through them at drive time on day one, back to school in Fulton County, which is the biggest county
It's
in
like
Atlanta. So
there's
it's
your
just kinda funny.
diary being
There
read
it
out
is.
loud.
No,
Right.
that's
World,
legitimately
right?
how it felt, because I was panicking a little bit,
Yeah.
but it all worked out.
And there were a couple of them that were contextualized to that group, which wouldn't necessarily make sense, like little inside jokes.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there was some of that.
It did feel like they were reading my diary on
Yeah, that was a good way to
the
put
radio.
it.
So
Yeah.
Wow, that would be very vulnerable. And
Yeah.
It
I would,
was-
wow.
it was. It was
So-
very
Yeah.
like, oh, this is cool. Also, it's not cool at all. I don't know.
Yeah. So we include that in the chapter. All Allie's rules for high school are in there in those friendship relationship chapter. Yeah. So
As being a parent, I think one of the things that we are always concerned about is, will my children be followers of Jesus? Mm-hmm. And will they grow up to love him? Will they want to serve him? And I'm just curious, is that part of the reason why this book came about?
It absolutely is. It absolutely is. And, a lot of times, I think parents in this season, they're so busy with the blocking and tackling of parenting that they don't necessarily lean into discipling their kids hopefully they're sort of modeling some of the principles and the things that a Jesus follower does and what being a Jesus follower looks like. But in the blocking and tackling and the busyness of life, it's really, really hard. And so this is one of those opportunities for moms and daughters particularly to just pause and be able to, for the mom to be able to have this opportunity to disciple and to help lead her daughter into a growing relationship with Christ. So that was definitely one of the biggest reasons and goals behind the book, is just pressing pause from the busyness and leaning into the spiritual development of our daughters.
And speaking of that, throughout the book, you focus on the scripture passage, Philippians 4:4-9. And what is it about those verses that was so applicable to the topic?
Yeah, well, when we were going through the different topics that we wanted to discuss, we kind of realized that Philippians 4 really kind of touched on all of them. It was a very cool moment of, okay, we want this book to be so scripture heavy, because otherwise, what is the point? This is what this is all about. And so we realized, okay, rejoice in the Lord always. And then fix your eyes on these specific things and dwell on these good things, and do not be anxious, but be prayerful and be with thankfulness. Like, all of these things kind of weaved through the specific topics that we wanted to talk about. And so it was really cool how it all came together. And another thing specifically about that passage, in verse 8, the whatever is true, whatever is lovely, whatever is right. The word lovely was a word that my mom really pulled from for kind of my entire childhood. She kind of used that word to help guide me and talk to me about things. So okay, well, Allie, what would be the lovely thing to do? And how can you do that in a lovely way? And hey, maybe try again, because what you just did/said was not lovely. And so that word we kind of grasped onto as I was growing up in my middle school and high school years. And so when we wanted to do a project together, we were like, we really want to incorporate Philippians 4, because that's kind of how, that was language that we used. We actually really wanted to figure out how to title the book Lovely, but it did not work out.
Didn't work as well.
But that
It would have been a lovely book.
Yeah, right? Thank you. So we really just, that passage was important to us as I was growing up. And when we looked at it closer, we were like, this is kind of perfect. Yeah. This is a really applicable passage to the lives of these girls, for sure.
Yeah. And in that season of life, there's so much truth in this passage, and we all tend to make decisions. And I think our kids, especially in those teen years, we tend to make decisions based on emotions, not necessarily on truth. So if we can help our girls move to the place where their filter for decision making is truth, not emotion, they are so far ahead of the game. And we just felt like this passage is filled with truth for our hearts and our minds to dwell on. So especially when it comes to some hard things, if we can help our daughters filter it through some of the truth of Scripture, that just was a really big deal for us.
Wow. That's, it's amazing just to hear you talking, because I feel like I'm looking in a mirror between me and my daughter, who I just see the lovely side, to use that word, of my husband and his family, the creative, the happy-go-lucky, where, Sandra, you and I could be twins, because, there's too much seriousness that needs to happen. So the conflict between us, now she's grown and has her own children, and that makes me a grandma. Mm-hmm. And it's just so nice to get to this point. But tell me, Sandra, how did your growing up years and your own experience with relationships with your own parents, how did that help or change the way you were navigating through Allie's teen years?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sally. So I'm just so blessed and so thankful to have been graced with the mom and dad that I was given. And I still have them, at 58 years old, I still have my mom and dad, and I'm so grateful for that. But one of the things that Andy noticed early in our marriage about my family was that there was this draw to all of us being together. I'm the middle of three, so I've got an older sister, a younger brother. We're all pretty close in age. And it was amazing to him how we fought to be together whenever we had opportunities to be, mom, dad, the three of us. And he just wanted to replicate that in our family. I just thought it was what all families were like. And he was like, no, that's not what all families are like. And so when we had our first child, we, did that whole, this is our first, we're stepping into parenting and we want to get this right. And so we want to set some goals, so we decided to set some goals. And really, after a lot of conversation and a few years of parenting, you kind of massage that and tweak that a little bit. And that's when we decided we want to parent with the relationship in mind. And that's what Andy saw modeled in my family. And that's what he wanted to replicate in ours. And so that informed a lot of our parenting decisions. How, what goes on the calendar, what doesn't go on the calendar, what we prioritize, what we make a big deal of as it relates to discipline, and what we don't make a big deal of as it relates to discipline. And when you're in ministry, we had the advantage of Andy being a preacher's kid. I was not a preacher's kid, so I didn't know the unique, challenges and things that preachers' kids face and have to go through, but he did. And so he was so good at putting some of that aside, because he just intuitively knew, hey, that is not going to be parenting toward the kind of relationship that we want, putting extra pressure on our kids and being worried about reputation all the time. So there was a lot of stuff from my family that informed our parenting journey. And even my mom is a little more like Allie. So I'm sandwiched in between creatives. So that probably did help me a little bit as it related to parenting her.
Probably just the awareness of that is like the biggest key to the success of blending the different families, because it's going to happen in any marriage and in any relationship. When two people come together, there are going to be different experiences and they kind of flow through us.
Yeah,
so,
and it's important to have conversations. Yeah.
Really making a point of respecting and admiring and enjoying the difference, with my husband's family just being gregarious and outgoing and my family being a little more reserved, and how are we going to blend that together and really celebrate it, especially in our daughter. So now it's just, I think it's the same for you, Sandra. Now it's just the joy of my life to see where she's like, the house can be messy, but what difference does it matter? We're all together and having a blast. And I'm like learning from her,
Right. There are more important things.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm still all for tidiness. However, there are more important things.
When I married my husband, a couple of family dinners in, he looked at me and he goes, "Why do your parents do all the dishes before we eat dessert?" Like, what a weird thing that they do. Like, and I'm like, I've never noticed that, but they do. Like, we're kind of all like just waiting for all the dishes or doing the dishes before we're allowed to eat dessert. And it's
There's order to things, right, Sandra? Order.
Dishes in a sink. I just have dirty dishes in a sink. I have trouble with that. Yeah.
Me too. Me too.
So funny.
Maybe I need to see someone about it.
Well, then I need to go along with you because, Raj knows now. Do not think you're soaking a pan in the sink. No, there is no
overnight. Not at least
I'm
not
such
overnight.
A fan of soaking.
Yeah.
No,
I love to soak. Soak it all for as long as you need to.
Yeah, take it in the bathtub with you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was a slow burn.
You talk about three. I'm moving on from the soaking.
Please do. Please do.
See, I'm the guy that has dirty dishes in the sink.
No, you guys
do,
want to see
no.
my sink right now?
Well, you guys are the fun ones.
Yeah, we're
That's
super
right.
fun.
That's right.
What are you identify 3 relationship phases that before we move on, I want to make sure we don't skip this. Talk to me about that, because I think that also feeds into how we respond and react to different situations.
Yeah, well, in our chapter where we talk specifically about friends and romantic relationships, which was super fun to write about, we talk about how no matter what, we are called to love. And there are 3 different seasons of a potential, very close friendship or potential romantic relationship, but in all of them, we're called to love. So the first one is, when you're thinking through the relationship and trying to figure out if you're going to enter into this relationship or enter into a close friendship. What does it look like to love but still be careful and thinking about, do you want to be more like this person? Do you feel like this person will lead you closer to the Lord or pull you further away from the Lord? And then the next one is when you are in that relationship and we ask questions, or we challenge the girls to not let someone who might not be in our future forever impact our future. So talking through wise decisions and how to really navigate that relationship well while honoring them and honoring yourself. And then the last one, which I really like, because I think when I was in middle school and high school and even college, this was not something that we really talked about in the church a lot, which was after the relationship. Because in culture, after, a romantic relationship, after a breakup or after a friendship breakup or after you grow apart from someone, which unfortunately is pretty common and is going to happen, not in all relationships, but in a lot of them, you are still called to love that person. And I think it's so easy and it's so fun and it's so culturally appropriate to hate them and be mean about them and say horrible things about them, and just air out all the dirty laundry. But the reality is that as Jesus followers, we're still called to love. Now, that most of the time means loving from a distance, not entering back into any type of relationship. That's not what God is calling us to do, but he is calling us to honor even on the other side of a relationship. So I think it's important to teach our girls, and even for us to remember in adult friendships that we have now, that sometimes friendships are seasonal, and where are you in that friendship? And regardless of where you are, how can you love that person where you are right now?
Yep. And one of the things that I think is so important from a mom's perspective, the tension that we feel in our daughters, especially more, as they're navigating early little romantic relationships, the two big things we focus on that Allie mentioned during that relationship is don't trade what you want most for what you want in the moment. And don't let your future be negatively impacted by people who won't even be in your future. And those are two really good talking points for us with our daughters when they're in a relationship. And, particularly if it's a relationship we're not wild about, and there are just certain things that we're concerned about, just having that conversation of don't trade what you want most for what you might want in the heat of a moment. And then don't let someone who's probably not going to be in your future negatively impact your future. And if you're having those conversations ahead of time before there's a specific face that we're talking about, it's a whole lot easier than if we're in the heat of the moment. It's an important conversation to have, even if it is in the heat of the moment, in the heat of the relationship, but ahead of time is such an important conversation to have.
So
That's very good.
that.
Yeah. Now, Allie, I think you were in a unique position going into this book. I mean, first of all, you were a teenage girl, super helpful for this
Super
topic.
helpful. Yeah.
But I think, you were in ministry at such a young age, which not everybody has that experience. I love that. How do you think that kind of helped prep you to delve into this project?
Yeah, I think it definitely helped me have a more clear understanding of what our girls are going through right now. Because I think it's easy, especially for me, because I was, I'm in my 20s still. So it's like, oh, I know exactly what every middle school and high schooler is going through because I just was one. But culture changes so fast. And so even when I was there, things are so different. And so having those years really doing life with these girls and hearing what they're struggling with and hearing what is being said in school and hearing what's popular and what's not, I think helped me to realize like, oh, things actually are different than from when I was there, and that's okay. And because it just changes so rapidly. So I think having the opportunity to be in ministry and walk alongside these girls kind of helped me realize, oh, things have changed already, and I never want to be that person that's like, well, I know exactly what you're going through because I was that too. And the reality is it's things, once again, they change. So I think it gave me a more accurate picture of what they're really going through and what they really need to hear, and how to take these overarching biblical truths of identity and not comparing yourself to other and not being afraid and helping to narrow those down to a little bit more specifically of how it impacts their life and how they can actually apply these things to the specific context that they're in.
I love that.
One of the things that we do at our church when our kids are in high school, we encourage them to apply and be vetted and interviewed to see and to be a volunteer on Sunday mornings, either with our preschool or elementary age or middle school groups. So they're always with an adult in those groups. And so when Allie says she led a middle school group, she was with an adult leader. And one of the things that does is it fosters, some leadership development, but it also gives our high school students a little added sense of accountability, because they're going to want to model for those kids what they're talking about on Sunday mornings. And that, I think, was such a good thing for all three of our kids to do when they were in high school. I remember with our middle school son, with our middle son, he was leading a small group, and he had made a not great decision as a teenager. And he said, when we were having a conversation with him, he said, after that happened, all I could think about was, what would my middle school boys think? And, it just gave him some added accountability, and, it's just kind of a healthy thing. And that's where Allie's love for student ministry really kind of got its start. So, but we don't toss high school kids in with middle school groups and let them just take off and lead by themselves.
Let's go rogue.
Yeah.
Now I do. So you mentioned something that I was thinking about just even at the start of this, how quickly things change for what kids are facing. I remember the insane change that happened in less than 10 years from when I graduated high school to my mid-20s. Social media was suddenly a thing where it wasn't before. So the things that, and this was early 2000s. I just dated myself. I probably shouldn't have done that. But it just, and now I can't even imagine, bullying stopped when I went home. And that's just not the case anymore. It follows you everywhere. And there are more and more venues. And that's just one of the things they're facing. What are some of the pressures that our kids are under now that maybe we don't even realize is going on?
Yeah. Well, I do. I got my social media my sophomore year of high school. So I'm kind of in that transitional, young millennial phase. But the fact that most people are getting their social media in middle school.
So
and you're right. I love how you said bullying used to stop at school and now it continues on with home, which I would also say information about your friends used to stop at school. And just an inundation of information and drama used to stop at school, and now it's constant. It's in the middle of the night. You can always pick up your phone and see a Snapchat or an Instagram DM, or there's all these social medias I don't even really know about anymore. But I do think that is the main thing, and that has increased the comparison. We've all been comparing ourselves to each other since the dawn of time, but that's just increased that. I think it's increased just fear of missing out, fear of being excluded, fear of saying the wrong thing or posting the wrong thing or leaving someone out and then they then leave you. It's just fear has super escalated. Mental health issues, we don't even have to get into that. We know that has super escalated. But then this idea of the world telling you who you are has also super escalated because you're inundated with information. You're constantly being told, you didn't get this many likes. You're not as good as this person. I think it's an attack on their identity. And truly, as your identity is forming, that's where you make your decisions out of. That's how where you act out of your relationships out of. And so truly, I think the change has been just an attack on their identity, which is why getting truth in front of them, having their mom walk into their room and say, put down your phone, we're going to read this book and we're going to talk about Jesus and we're going to talk about who you are and whose you are and what that means for your life and how much worth you have and how loved you are. As the social media goes up, this truth in the scripture and the discipleship has to go up as well, or these girls are just going to drown. Yeah. So I think really going back to equipping the parents who are in the house with them, I think is so crucial in order to pull them out of the drowning of the taking your phone with you. I just think it really has created a whole epidemic of identity problems.
Oh, 100%. I'm an adult, obviously, but I was just thinking about something that circulated on TikTok just a couple of years ago, and it has never left my mind. And I find myself kind of elevating that every time I open the app, because it was a trending sound, and it was like, by the way, if your follows are nowhere near as high as your likes, it means you're funny, but you're not attractive enough to get those followers.
Ooh.
And that was just one little thing, like it's something goofy, a one-off thing somebody said that turned into a trending sound. And now all of a sudden, that's how I'm identifying myself when I open up TikTok. And I'm like, how silly to even get wrapped up in that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because I think
so
about how
easy.
often I like something and I don't follow the person.
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the things as moms, it's so easy for us to, when we notice that our kids are struggling with something like that, it's so easy for us to go, oh, you don't need to worry about that. Just, kind of don't look over there. It's hard to have some handles to address some of that stuff with our kids. And so Allie and I, as we were laying this book out and as we were just trying to be so prayerful about it, we wanted one of the very first topics they talk about to be who you are in Christ and understand who your identity, who your identity is in. And that gives our moms a really strong conversation piece when they're talking about any of that stuff, whether it's bullying, whether it's, just awareness of what everybody is doing and how you're being left out and all of that. It's not necessarily an emotionally satisfying answer for our children and for our daughters, especially when we say, but here's who God says you are. It may not be emotionally satisfying for them in the moment, but it is another deposit of truth that it's slowly going to help them eventually weigh that more heavily. And I just think that's important. I think it's important for moms to be a little bit equipped to know how to combat some of that and how to address some of that. And really the only defense to that is here's who God says you are. He is the one who made you. He is the one who has gifted you. He is the one who knit you together. All of those truths about who our daughters are. If our moms are equipped to talk about their identity, that is the only defense against some of that escalating stuff. And again, not emotionally satisfying in the moment for our daughter because she still feels left out, but it is another deposit into the bucket of here's who God says you are. Mm-hmm. And eventually that is going to be the truth that she latches onto.
You guys are talking about social media and being concerned about, will they like this? You're going to get dinged for saying that. Gosh, I deal with that as an adult.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I'll be halfway through.
We've gotten
Your
dinged
brain
a few
is fully
times.
developed.
Right. You have the full frontal lobe.
Yeah. I'm not sure mine is still, but
So almost, yeah.
I'm halfway through posting something, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. I mean, I'll freak out over that. So, ask you a question about that and regarding parenting, and that is, that my daughter that I mentioned who has special needs, she passed away in June. Oh. She's 21, and she had cerebral palsy, so she really, couldn't be on social media, anything like that. Our son is 15 and a half. We don't have him on there yet. Any idea when that's a good idea to let that happen? Because right now, it's not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I
don't
didn't
know
have
if I
to
can
parent
really
through
speak
that, so
to
I'm going to let
boys.
Allie.
I mean, I think it depends on the emotional maturity of that person. Because I do think parents try to set okay, no social media till you're 16, no social media till you're da-da-da-da. And I do think it has more to do with the maturity of the student, of the person. Yeah. I think... personally, when I think about my kids, I'm thinking no social media till 16. That feels, if I don't trust you to drive a car, I don't think I trust you with the whole world at your hand.
Ooh, That's
Wow.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
16.
And I'm really praying that culture goes that way too. So this isn't like the weird Cooney family who doesn't have social. I'm really hoping every parent who has had social media for so long is thinking that too. Who knows? That's just a prayer I have. But I think a good rule of thumb is 16.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think there is a lot to be said for maturity and for, you know, one of the decision-making things that spoke heavily into some of our stuff was who our kids' friends were. You know, 2 of our kids had really healthy friendships all the time. One of them didn't have the best friends around them all the time. And so there were just certain things that we didn't feel like we had to parent fairly with our kids. We figured we need to parent specifically to each kid. And so I think, to Allie's point, you know, evaluating maturity, evaluating certain benchmarks, you know, for your son, kind of have a general idea about when, but then, you know, have a little flexibility as it relates to where he is in his spiritual journey and his maturity and all of that.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry for your loss. Goodness.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's a tough space. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been hard. It's
Yeah.
it's a new normal, you know.
Right.
Now, thankfully, he hasn't asked for it.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, he hasn't been, come on, I want to get on there. So that's good. Hey, talk about the relationship between parents and kids in those teen years and why just relationship is important.
Yeah. Family relationships are the permanent relationships. You know, we talked a few minutes ago about, you know, not letting people who aren't even going to be in your future influence your future and influence your present. But parents and siblings and family are the ones who are kind of forever. So we talk a lot about, there's a whole chapter just about family relationships and navigating all of that. We talk about 3 particular things: appreciating family, forgiving family, and then being gentle with family. And Allie came up with those 3, being the younger sister of 2 big brothers who, you know, probably were not always nurturing and kind. In fact, there was a game that they would play in the back seat before I told Andy, I want a van and I want it tomorrow so kids can't touch each other. And I had
More
always
space.
not wanted a van. Yeah. But there was a game they
There
played.
was no one who wanted a van more than me.
Yeah,
Is it
Allie
Slug
wanted
Bug?
it the
What
most.
was it?
Yeah.
Oh no! It was
Tell
more
them about their
creative than
game,
that.
Allie.
They called it Allie Jenga. You have no idea yet. Don't try to figure it out. You won't. I would fall asleep. I'm a sleepy girl. Always have been. Always will be. I love a nap. And they would pull out one of my hairs. They would take turns pulling out my hair. And whichever one
Till
I
you
woke
woke
up on, they lost. Yeah.
Word.
And
I'm in
then,
the driver's seat. I didn't know this was happening.
yeah. It was tough. And then they'd be like, we won't do it again. Go back to
brothers.
sleep. Go back to sleep. And I'd be like, okay. And then I'd just go back to sleep and they'd do it again.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, man. Man, our siblings are so nice to each other all the
So
time.
sweet.
Yeah.
What a sweet thing. Yeah.
So, Allie, do you want to talk about those 3 things?
Yeah, so coming off of that for sure. So appreciate, this was more toward, you know, the parent of, well, when I came up with these, I was kind of in the mindset of a lot of times middle school and high school girls feel like they have no control when it comes to their family. You know, they didn't get to choose their family. They don't get to choose what they eat for dinner. They don't get to choose the chores and how the family works. You know, a lot of times people or kids just feel like it's happening to them. And so I wanted to give them 3 things that they actually have control over and that they get to choose for themselves. So the first one is choosing to appreciate, you know, choose to look around, see who's doing what for them. Specifically, this is very aimed at mom, and appreciate them for that. And then the next one is you get to choose if you forgive people or not. You know, scripture, Jesus tells us we absolutely need to forgive people, but it's ultimately up to us. No other human being can forgive on your behalf. You get to choose to do it.
Oh, wouldn't that be great?
Right?
Hey, Misty, can you forgive so-and-so for me?
For me, please. Thank you. So that's
like,
the
"No,
next
I
one.
won't."
Yeah.
And then the last
Don't ask
one.
me.
Yeah. the last one, which we pulled from Philippians 4, the let your gentleness be evident to all, for the Lord is near. You get to choose gentleness, and you get to choose de-escalating situations instead of escalating situations, and you get to choose your words, and you get to choose your posture. And that section, I really had my brothers in mind, because I did learn as a middle school girl that they wanted a reaction out of me. And so every time I chose gentleness, it became less fun and they would kind of back off. And so if I chose screaming, fighting, punching, which I don't have a very good punch, so that never worked out for me, but that is what they wanted, you know? And so ultimately choosing gentleness helps de-escalate. So yeah, those were the three things.
Wow,
They
we can
really
apply
did
those
turn
as adults,
into
right?
They really did turn into wonderful men.
I love how you had to add that in there.
I
They're not
know.
delinquents now.
I know. Yeah.
Little disclaimer there.
Yeah,
exactly.
they're great now.
You know, our lives are so busy and time is limited. So how do we make the most of time together?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, one of the things that I talk about is your time is limited, so you have to limit what you do with your time. And that just kind of means priorities. And I think, you know, because in this book I'm talking primarily to moms. Andy and I did a parenting one a couple years ago, but this is really to moms. And moms are the keepers of the calendar, typically, in most families. And so I just talk a little bit about, hey, let's use the family calendar to foster some of the most important things, and to say no. You know, when opportunities come our way, there are just certain seasons of life where I had categorical no's. You know, this is just for this season of my life, this category of things is a no. So for me, when the kids were young and I'm in the heavy duty, kind of heavy lifting of parenting, I wasn't writing and I wasn't traveling or speaking or any of the things that I'm doing a little bit more of now. I just decided, hey, in this season, this is a no for now. Not necessarily for always, a no for now. And it's, you know, the calendar for me, again, I'm a little more analytical, but whatever's on my calendar is what happens. So, you know, for me to calendar time with Allie, I know it's going to happen, you know. So in those years, I had things on my calendar like exercise, like calling my grandmother at the time. I mean, I calendared everything because what gets on the calendar gets done, and I wanted to make sure that the most important things were on the calendar. So we're living in a busy, you know, time of life, and especially in the heavy parenting years, it's so busy. So let your calendar work for you and recognize that a no for now doesn't mean no for always. And our time is limited. So we've got to limit what we do with our time.
You know, I have a calendar for work, and it's packed. Yeah. It's like both Misty and Sarah, like, you are always in a meeting.
Yeah.
But the truth is, I don't really have that set up as much for my personal life. That's smart. I think I should do that. That's good.
Mm-hmm. It just works for me. And
Yeah.
if it's on the calendar, I treat it like an appointment. Yeah.
That's good. I like that a lot.
And I wonder if, as wives and moms, because I totally was mother bear over the calendar, was when our kids were growing up. I'm so grateful that I realized this time is fleeting.
Yes.
And we only have this one time.
Yeah.
So my husband, who is gregarious and loves everybody and relationships and going and doing and being, I was always reining him in, reminding him we've got this one moment.
Right.
When they're gone, you can be
That's
off,
right.
you know, with
Yeah.
all the guys and doing all the things, but these days we'll never get back again.
That's
So
exactly
really
right.
applaud what you're saying about be a guardian of this precious time together. Remind our kids that your family is forever. I
That's right.
totally echo that. My kids heard that over and over and over again. Love your friends, super good. But this brother of yours,
He's forever.
he's gonna be around.
He's not
forever.
going anywhere.
So you know what?
That's right. That's right.
That's what we're gonna preserve. So
Yeah.
Plus, when you get
So
a little
much of
older,
it
Sally,
is
I
just-
think that's when you start appreciating your siblings. It's like,
Yes.
you know, and they get nicer, I think.
well, that's
Yeah.
right.
They
That's
do.
right. They don't
They do
know
get
that
nicer.
though. In those preteen years, they don't
Yeah.
know that.
Oh, my
Right.
mom would tell me that, and I'd be like, no, yeah.
Nobody's more surprised. No one is more surprised at Andrew and Garrett's successfully navigating adulthood than Allie. So,
I was like, these two are gonna end up in jail. Like,
Yeah, I think my sister growing up would have voted for me to be in jail. That's absolutely true.
Yeah, superlative.
Sandra-
That was your superlative.
Yeah. Sandra Stanley, Allie Stanley Cooney, thank you so much. The book is Meet Me in the Middle, 8 Mother-Daughter Conversations about Life and Faith. Thank you so much for your time. It's really good.
Thank y'all for having us.
Yeah, excellent.